A look at the chemical classifications of hormones. So there are three main groups that we can put all hormones into, and those three groups are the steroid hormones, the monoamines, and the peptides. Now, steroid hormones are going to be lipid-based hormones, and they are typically derived from cholesterol. So cholesterol is either made in your body, a lot of your cholesterol is made in your liver, and then some of it you can get from the food that you eat. But cholesterol has lots of different functions. It helps form cell membranes in the body. And another important function is the production of some of our really important hormones like estrogen and testosterone that you see here. So these steroid hormones, since they are lipids, they're lipid based, that means that they are going to be hydrophobic, meaning that these hormones do not mix well with water. And they also, can pass through cell membranes very easily because the inside of our cell membranes is also very hydrophobic, meaning it does not like water either. So these steroid hormones, which I'll mention more in just a second, go through what we call direct gene activation, meaning they can pass straight through the cell membrane of a cell and directly act on the DNA of that cell in order to, stimulate it or tell it what to do. Now, the next two groups of hormones here, the monoamines and peptides, both of these are going to be derived from amino acids. And amino acids are building blocks of proteins. Okay, so the monoamines are going to be a little bit smaller in structure, as you'll see. The peptides are typically going to be larger in structure. These can contain up to a couple hundred amino acids forming them, like this insulin molecule you see here. But both of these hormones are going to be protein based because they're amino acid based, meaning they are going to be hydrophilic. So they do like water, and that means that they're not going to be able to pass through the cell membrane very easily. And so they have to go through what's called a second messenger system in order to be able to stimulate a cell. Since they're not going to be able to get through the cell membrane and act on the DNA directly, they're going to have to go through a second messenger system. So here you can kind of see those groups of hormones. So the peptide hormones are shown up here with letter A, and then you've got a steroid hormone shown with letter B. Remember, I mentioned that the steroid hormones are hydrophobic. They do not mix well with water, and same thing for our cell membrane. So that means that steroid hormones can easily pass through the cell membrane. They can squeeze right in between those phospholipids of the cell membrane, get into the cell, and they can bind to receptors, hormone receptors, within the nucleus of the cell directly on the DNA. And when they bind to those receptors, that can cause a change, or not necessarily a change in the DNA, but it can stimulate that cell to undergo transcription of that part of the DNA, which will essentially, DNA is that's our instruction template for our cells. And so if we can stimulate that cell to read this particular part of the DNA, transcribe that part of the DNA, it could stimulate that cell to produce a specific protein that corresponds with that part of the DNA. Okay, so that is how steroid hormones will work on the cell. They pass directly through the cell membrane, and they act on hormone receptors that are found inside of the cell, inside of the nucleus of the cell, and are bound to DNA of that cell. And so they're, targeting the DNA specifically to tell that cell which proteins need to be made. Now, if you look up here at the peptide hormones, remember these are hydrophilic, and so they cannot pass through the cell membrane. So they have to bind to hormone receptors on the outside of the cell. And when they do that, that can stimulate the production of a second messenger that is inside of the cell. Now, one of our most common types of second messengers that we have in the endocrine system is CAMP, cyclic AMP. And so this second messenger, once it is produced, it can then activate enzymes within the cell to cause some kind of metabolic effect. Maybe it speeds the cell up at the production of a protein. Maybe it slows it down. It could be a whole lot of different effects. It depends on what the hormone is and what enzyme is actually activated in that cell as to what is going to take place inside of that cell. Okay, so again, peptide hormones cannot pass through the cell membrane. They have to bind to hormone receptors on the surface of the cell. And when they do that, that activates the production of a second messenger, cyclic AMP, which can then activate enzymes inside of that cell, and those can have various effects within the cell. So this type of, this second messenger system, this way of delivering a message, I like to think of as if you are inside of a room and somebody is outside of the room and you have the door shut, and you're trying to deliver a message, but the person that is outside of the room is not allowed to come in. Well, you could actually send a second messenger, the cyclic AMP, to kind of pick that message up and carry it the rest of the way, right? To carry it into the room and deliver that message to the inside of the room. And that's what the cyclic AMP is. It's just a second messenger. It's kind of a delivery man to pick up that message from the hormone and carry it inside of the cell to where that message can be relayed. So if you guys have any questions about these three major groups of hormones or how they can stimulate or act on a target cell, please let me know and I will get back to you as soon as I can.